Have you ever wondered why certain videos, certain messages, certain opportunities seem to find you at exactly the moment you need them most? You might think it's coincidence, or perhaps you believe it's the algorithm doing its job. But what if I told you that you didn't stumble upon this video by accident? What if the real reason you're here right now, reading these words, has nothing to do with chance and everything to do with an invisible force you've been broadcasting into the world without even realizing it? Before we dive deeper into this, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now, let me ask you something personal. Has this ever happened to you? You're scrolling through your feed, mind-wandering, perhaps feeling stuck or searching for answers to a problem you can't quite articulate, and suddenly something stops you in your tracks. A title, an image, a phrase that feels like it was written specifically for you. That's not random. That's resonance. You were brought here by something far more powerful than curiosity or boredom. You were brought here by the silent frequency of your own consciousness, by the accumulated weight of your repeated thoughts, your recurring emotions, and those internal images. You've been playing on repeat in the privacy of your own mind. Most people will never understand this. They'll go through life believing they're passive observers, victims of circumstance, powerless spectators watching events unfold around them. But you're different. The fact that these words found you, that something within you responded to this message, tells me that a part of you, a part you might not even be consciously aware of, has already made a decision. It has grown tired of the old patterns, the same limitations, the feeling of being pushed around by forces outside your control. This video is a mirror, and I need to tell you honestly that not everyone is ready to look into it without flinching. It takes courage to face the truth about how reality actually works, about the role you've been playing in creating the very circumstances you might be complaining about. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you, might challenge everything. You thought you knew about manifestation, about success, about why some people seem to effortlessly attract what they desire while others struggle endlessly, despite working twice as hard. The small percentage of people who are ready for this mirror, who can stand before it and truly see themselves, are the ones who transform their lives. They stop being effects and become causes. They stop reacting and start creating. And if you're still here, if something inside you is saying, yes, I need to hear this, then you're already beginning that transformation. You're already stepping into a new understanding of how your internal state doesn't just reflect your reality, it constructs it, shapes it, summons it into existence. So let me ask you one more time, and answer honestly. When was the last time you felt like you were truly in control of your life, rather than just responding to whatever was thrown at you? Because here's something most people never realize. You're not here for entertainment. I know that might sound harsh in a world where we're trained to consume content mindlessly, scrolling for distraction, looking for something to make us feel better for a few minutes. But this isn't that kind of message. You've already begun a process, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. You've started to become dangerous to the old limitations that have kept you stuck in the same patterns, the same cycles, the same frustrating results. Think about the journey you've been on. How many times have you tried to change, to break free, only to find yourself right back where you started? That's not failure. That's simply what happens when you approach transformation from the outside in, rather than from the inside out. The hidden truth that shifts everything is understanding that you are not a passive participant in this experience called life. Yet if you look around, if you observe how most people move through their days, you'll see something striking. They live in perpetual reactive mode, constantly responding to external events as if they have no choice in the matter. An unexpected bill arrives, and their entire emotional state collapses. A message comes through with a tone they don't like, and suddenly their day is ruined. Someone gives them a contemptuous look, and they spend hours replaying it in their mind, creating stories about what it meant. Economic shifts happen, and they feel powerless. Work problems emerge, and they're immediately swept into crisis mode. It's like watching pieces on a game board being pushed around by distant powers they believe they have no control over. The impact of living this way compounds over time. Stress accumulates, confidence erodes, and that sense of being a victim of circumstances becomes so deeply embedded that it feels like truth. If this resonates with you, subscribe to the channel. There's so much more we're going to explore together, principles that don't just sound good but actually create real shifts in how you experience reality. But here's what I need you to understand, and this is where the real revelations begin. Every single one of those reactions, every emotional collapse, every moment of feeling powerless, those aren't happening to you. They're happening through you, and there's a massive difference. Your mindset in any given moment isn't shaped by what's happening outside. It's shaped by the state you were already occupying before that external event even occurred. The person who receives an unexpected bill while carrying a state of scarcity and fear will have a completely different experience than someone who receives the same bill while carrying a state of resourcefulness and trust. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because understanding it intellectually is one thing, but seeing how it actually operates in the mechanics of your daily life is where everything changes. The decisions you make, the opportunities you notice, the energy you bring into every interaction, all of it stems from this invisible state you're broadcasting, and most people never question it because they've been conditioned to believe that circumstances dictate state, when in reality it works the other way around. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to shift my state," because acknowledging this is the first step toward taking back your power from the reactive patterns that have been running your life. What most people don't realize, and this is where the journey gets truly fascinating, is that everything materializing in your experience right now, every relationship, every financial situation, every opportunity that shows up or doesn't show up, is merely the visible surface of something you previously assumed, either consciously or unconsciously. It's not random, it's not punishment, it's not even about what you deserve in some cosmic sense. It's simply the law of sustained inner state playing out with mathematical precision. Your external life is a perfect mirror, reflecting your internal assumptions back to you, and nothing escapes this process. Nothing. I know that might be difficult to accept at first, especially if you're looking at areas of your life that feel broken or stuck. The natural response is to say, "But I didn't choose this, I didn't want this. How could this be a reflection of me?" And I understand that resistance because I've felt it too. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything once you really grasp it. Your current life, in every detail, is a faithful reflection of what you've accepted as possible, deserved, and natural for yourself. Not what you consciously want or wish for, but what you've accepted at the deepest level of your being as the reality you expect to live. Think about the decisions you make every single day, the small ones that seem insignificant, the job you stay in even though it drains you, the relationships you tolerate even though they diminish you, the amount of money you allow yourself to receive, the level of respect you accept from others, the opportunities you pursue or let pass by. Behind each of these decisions is an invisible assumption about what's possible for someone like you, about what you're worthy of experiencing, about what feels natural given who you believe yourself to be. The impact of this realization can be uncomfortable because it removes the safety of blame. You can no longer point to the economy, your parents, your past, your circumstances, or bad luck as The reason things are the way they are. You can deny this principle, you can argue with it, you can build elaborate intellectual cases against it, but you cannot escape its operation in your experience. It's like gravity. Whether you believe in it or not, whether you like it or not, it's still functioning every single moment of every single day. What makes this both challenging and incredibly empowering is understanding that these assumptions aren't always conscious. You didn't sit down one day and deliberately decide to accept limitation in certain areas of your life. These assumptions were installed gradually, through repetition, through experiences that seemed to confirm them, through the stories you told yourself about why things happened the way they did. They became the invisible framework through which you interpret everything that happens, and that framework determines what you notice, what you ignore, what you pursue, and what you avoid. But here's where the revelation becomes truly powerful. If your external world is reflecting your internal assumptions, then the pathway to transformation isn't out there. It's in here, in the shift of what you're willing to accept as true for yourself. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending everything is fine when it's not. This is about recognizing that the very foundation upon which your current reality rests is made of assumptions, and assumptions can be changed. Put in the comments, "I see the reflection now," because seeing it is what breaks the spell of believing you're powerless to change it. So if the reflection is clear, if you can see that your outer world has been shaped by inner assumptions, then the next step is probably the most important decision you'll make in this entire journey. You need to stop begging, stop negotiating with reality as if you're asking permission for what you desire. Stop pleading for crumbs from a table you don't even realize you're supposed to be sitting at. This isn't about arrogance or entitlement. It's about recognizing something fundamental about how consciousness works. You are not a servant waiting for reality to grant you favors. You are meant to sit on the inner throne of your own consciousness, claiming your rightful position as the creator of your experience, not the victim of it. Most people spend their entire lives in a posture of spiritual begging. They hope things will get better. They wish for change. They pray for rescue. They wait for circumstances to shift so they can finally feel worthy, finally feel safe, finally feel like they have permission to want what they want. And I'm not dismissing hope or prayer or desire. What I'm pointing to is the underlying mindset that keeps people locked in a subservient relationship with their own reality. When you're constantly asking, "Will this work? Can I really have this? Am I allowed to believe this is possible?" You're broadcasting the frequency of lack, of uncertainty, of someone who hasn't yet claimed their seat. Now here's where Joseph Murphy's teachings become absolutely revolutionary, and this is something that gets misunderstood constantly. When he talks about things working in an hour, people immediately think he's promising some magical external manifestation. Money appearing in your account, a text message arriving, a job offer dropping from the sky. And while those things can and do happen, that's not what he's actually talking about. The real miracle, the one that matters more than any external event, is that in 1 hour you can completely change your internal state. 60 minutes. That's all it takes to shift from feeling small, powerless, and at the mercy of circumstances to feeling centered, certain, and aligned with the reality you're choosing to occupy. If something shifted for you while watching this, go ahead and hit that like button. It's a simple way to tell me this landed, and it helps this message reach others who need to hear it right now. Think about the impact of that. Most people believe transformation is this long, arduous process that requires years of therapy, decades of meditation, or some dramatic life event to catalyze change. But what if the only thing standing between you and a completely different experience of life is 1 hour of consciously choosing a new state and refusing to abandon it? What if the reason change feels so difficult isn't because it actually is, but because people keep returning to the old state out of habit? Out of fear, out of the strange comfort of familiar suffering. The mechanics behind this are simpler than you think, but they require something most people aren't willing to give. Consistency of attention. You can't dabble in a new state for 5 minutes and then spend the rest of the day rehearsing the old one, expecting everything to shift. The decisions you make about where to place your attention, what thoughts to entertain, what feelings to cultivate, these aren't trivial choices. They're the building blocks of your state, and your state is the invisible force field that determines what you attract, what you notice, and what becomes possible. Write in the comments, "I'm claiming my throne," because declaring it out loud is how you begin to anchor this shift from asking for permission to simply deciding what's true for you. Once you understand that you can shift your state in an hour, the question becomes, what state are you choosing to occupy? And this is where most people stumble, because they're waiting for external proof before they allow themselves to feel successful, worthy, or complete. They think, once I get the job, then I'll feel confident. Once the money comes, then I'll feel abundant. Once someone chooses me, then I'll feel valuable. But that's backwards. The transformation happens when you embrace the identity now, before any external evidence shows up. You stop feeling small, rejected, or forgotten, and you firmly step into the identity of someone for whom the desired outcome is already an internal, accomplished, completed fact within consciousness. This isn't pretending. This isn't faking it. This is understanding something profound about how reality operates. Your external circumstances aren't the cause of your internal state, they're the effect. So when you wait for circumstances to change before you allow yourself to change, you're stuck in an endless loop. The journey you're on requires reversing this entirely. You must first become the person who already has it, who already lives it, who already embodies it, and then watch as the external world has no choice but to reorganize itself around this new center you're broadcasting from. The hidden truth here is that your life has a script, and that script is being written in real time based on the state you're sustaining. Most people don't realize they're walking around with an invisible narrative running in the background, dictating what's possible, what they deserve, what kind of treatment is normal, what level of success feels natural. This script was written over years through repeated thoughts, inherited beliefs, and experiences that seem to confirm certain limitations. But here's the revelation that changes everything. When your state changes, the script begins to reorganize itself. It has to. The external circumstances, the people who show up, the opportunities that present themselves, the problems that dissolve, all of it must eventually conform to your sustained internal state of being. Think about the impact this has on every decision you make moving forward. If you know that maintaining a new state will literally rewrite the script of your life, doesn't that change how seriously you take your moment-to-moment focus? The person who understands this doesn't treat their thoughts casually. They don't indulge in mental spirals of lack and limitation because they know those thoughts aren't just harmless background noise. They're actively coding the reality they'll experience next week, next month, next year. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. You don't need to force anything or strain to make changes happen. You simply need to occupy the state consistently enough that it becomes your new default, your new baseline, your new normal. And when that happens, when the new state isn't something you're trying to maintain but simply who you are, that's when the external world catches up in ways that will seem miraculous to others, but will feel completely natural to you. Drop in the comments, "My script is changing," because naming this process activates your conscious participation in it rather than letting it happen by default. Once you see that your script is changing, you start to notice something that might shake your entire understanding of how life works. It's not your situation that describes who you are. Read that again, because this is where most people get it completely backwards. Your situation, the job you have, the relationship status, the bank account balance, the health challenges, the social circle, none of that defines you. Your state decides what situation you will call my life. The state comes first, always. The circumstances follow, always. And understanding this sequence is what separates people who transform from people who remain trapped in cycles of hoping things will somehow magically improve. Most people look at their current situation and let it dictate how they feel, what they believe is possible, and what identity they carry forward into the next day. They wake up, check their phone, see the bills, the emails, the problems, and immediately their state collapses into alignment with those circumstances. But when you reverse this, when you decide your state first and hold it regardless of what the situation looks like, everything begins to shift. The decisions you make from that elevated state are different. The opportunities you notice are different. The energy you bring into conversations is different. And slowly, then suddenly, the situation itself begins to conform to the state you've been sustaining. Now here's something that might be uncomfortable to hear, but it's necessary for true transformation. Until now, you've been acting by reading lines someone else prepared for you. Think about the phrases that run through your mind when things get difficult. Money is hard to come by. Life is unfair. People like me never make it to that level. Something is always missing. When one thing gets better, something else falls apart. These statements feel like your own thoughts, but are they really? Or are they inherited scripts, lines of code that were installed into your mental system by parents, teachers, media, culture, and past experiences? The hidden truth is that these aren't just harmless thoughts passing through your awareness. They're programming. They're the operating system running in the background of your consciousness, determining what you seek out, what you avoid, what you perceive as realistic, and what you dismiss as impossible. Every time you repeat one of these lines to yourself, you're reinforcing the code, strengthening its grip on your perception, and ensuring that your external reality continues to reflect these limitations back to you. Behind the scenes of your conscious awareness, there's this constant narration happening. It's describing you to yourself, telling you who you are, what you can expect, what's normal for someone in your position. Most people never question this voice because it's been there so long it feels like truth. But what if it's not truth? What if it's just a story you've been told so many times that you started believing it was yours? The impact of recognizing this is profound, because once you see that you've been reading someone else's script, you can finally put it down and write your own. Leave a comment saying, "I'm rewriting my story," because acknowledging that the old script wasn't even yours is the first step toward consciously authoring the narrative you actually want to live. When you start rewriting your story, you quickly discover something fascinating about how beliefs actually work. Your state is born the moment you believe those negative lines deeply enough that they stop feeling like opinions and start feeling like obvious truths. That's when they become your operating system, running silently in the background of every decision, every perception, every interpretation of what happens to you. And here's where it gets almost eerie. From that point forward, everything that happens seems to confirm the script. You're not imagining this. It's a real phenomenon. Once a belief becomes embedded as truth, your mind becomes a detective searching exclusively for evidence that supports it, creating what's known as a self-fulfilling prophecy. Think about how this plays out in real life. If you believe that opportunities never come your way, you'll literally filter out the ones that do show up. You'll dismiss them as not being the right fit, not being quite what you're looking for, or you'll convince yourself you're not qualified. Meanwhile, someone operating from a different belief system sees the exact same opportunity and seizes it without hesitation. The difference isn't in the opportunity itself, it's in the lens through which it's being perceived. Your beliefs aren't neutral observers of reality. They're active participants, shaping what you notice, what you pursue, and what you allow into your experience. What's even more insidious is how your attention becomes magnetically drawn to evidence of lack. You start focusing more on what's missing than what's present. The bills that arrived get more mental energy than the money that came in. The relationship that ended occupies more thought space than the connections that are working. The failure from 3 years ago gets recalled in rich, vivid detail, while successes are downplayed or forgotten entirely. And the real tragedy is that you repeat the same story to yourself night after night, rehearsing it like an actor preparing for a role, until it becomes the only imaginable possibility for your future. This is the hidden mechanism behind why some people seem stuck in patterns they genuinely want to escape. It's not that they're not trying. It's not that they don't want change. It's that their attention has been trained to seek out and magnify everything that confirms the old story while simultaneously filtering out anything that would contradict it. The impact of this selective attention is devastating because you're essentially training yourself to become an expert at finding proof of your limitations while remaining blind to possibilities that exist right in front of you. Behind the scenes of your conscious awareness, there's a constant feedback loop happening. Belief creates focus. Focus creates evidence. Evidence reinforces belief, and round it goes, until breaking free seems impossible. But here's what shifts everything. The moment you become aware that you've been running this loop, you can interrupt it. You can consciously redirect your attention. You can choose to focus on different evidence. You can rehearse a different story. The journey from limitation to expansion isn't about acquiring something new. It's about recognizing what you've been unconsciously focusing on and making a deliberate decision to point your attention somewhere else. Type in the comments, "I'm changing my focus," because naming this shift is how you begin to break the automatic pattern of seeking evidence for the old story. Changing your focus is powerful, but it requires something most people avoid: brutal honesty about what's actually running through your mind. So let me ask you to do something right now that might be uncomfortable. Look at the area of your life that hurts the most. Maybe it's money, and every time you think about it, there's this tightness in your chest. Maybe it's love, and you're carrying this quiet belief that you're somehow not enough to keep someone's attention. Maybe it's health, recognition, opportunities. Whatever it is, choose the one that stings when you touch it. Now observe with complete honesty how you describe yourself in that area when no one is listening. When you're alone with your thoughts, what's the narrative? Are you always behind? Never quite measuring up? Constantly struggling while everyone else seems to have it easier? This internal narration is where everything begins. Most people have no idea how much power this quiet voice holds because it's always been there, like background music they've stopped consciously hearing. But here's the revelation that changes the game entirely. Before any external event happens, before any circumstance shows up, there's this internal announcer telling you each morning who you are and what you can or cannot experience. It's like having a narrator for your life, except this narrator isn't neutral. It's not simply reporting what's happening. It's actively creating what happens next by defining the boundaries of what you believe is possible, natural, and appropriate for someone like you. This invisible announcer is your state, and understanding its function is absolutely critical to transformation. It doesn't describe reality, it constructs reality. Every morning you wake up, and before you even fully open your eyes, this voice is already telling you the story of who you are. I'm someone who struggles with money. I'm someone who relationships don't work out for. I'm someone who never gets the recognition they deserve. And because this voice has been with you so long, because it sounds like you accept its pronouncements as factual observations rather than creative choices you're making moment by moment. The impact of recognizing this cannot be overstated. Once you see that the announcer isn't reporting objective truth, but rather generating your experience through its constant narration, everything shifts. You realize that the voice telling you who you are and what's possible isn't some authority figure you need to obey. It's a habit, it's programming, it's a character you've been playing so consistently that you forgot you were acting. Behind the scenes of your awareness, this announcer has been making decisions for you. What opportunities to pursue, what risks to take, what level of success feels comfortable, what kind of treatment to accept from others. Most people go their entire lives never questioning this voice, never realizing they can change the script it's reading from. They just keep listening, keep following its directions, keep living within the boundaries it sets, all while wondering why their external circumstances never seem to improve, regardless of how hard they work or how much they want things to be different. Write in the comments, "I hear the announcer now," because becoming conscious of this internal narrator is the first step toward choosing what it says rather than letting it run on autopilot. Once you hear the announcer, once you become aware that this internal voice has been running the show, you face a truth that's both liberating and demanding. Nothing changes on the outside as long as you continue to describe yourself with the same words, emotions, and feelings of identity. You can try 1,000 techniques, read every book, attend every seminar, visualize, until you're exhausted. But if the fundamental self-description remains unchanged, the external world has no choice but to keep reflecting that same inner narrative back to you. This is why so many people feel stuck, despite genuinely wanting transformation. They're trying to change the reflection without changing what's creating it. Think about the decisions you make from your current self-description. If you describe yourself as someone who always struggles financially, you'll unconsciously make choices that perpetuate that struggle. You'll avoid opportunities that feel too big. You'll sabotage success when it starts to arrive because it doesn't match your internal identity. You'll find ways to spend money as soon as it comes in because holding on to it feels unnatural for someone who identifies as struggling. The external circumstances aren't the problem. They're the inevitable outcome of who you've been describing yourself as being. So here's where the real work begins. And it's simpler than you think, but requires courage. Imagine your mind as a control room with multiple screens showing different scenes from your life. On one screen, there's the version of you living the problem that bothers you most, the financial stress, the relationship pattern, the health issue, whatever it is. This screen is playing on a loop, showing you evidence of the problem, replaying past failures, projecting future scenarios where nothing changes. Most people remain completely hypnotized by this screen. They zoom in on it, study every detail, replay the scenes over and over, and wonder why their life doesn't improve. The hidden truth is that there are other screens in this control room. There's a blank screen waiting to be filled with a completely different narrative. There's a screen showing the version of you for whom this problem is already resolved. But you can't see those screens if you're facing the problem screen, mesmerized by its familiar horror show. You must physically, mentally, emotionally turn your back on that screen. Stop giving it your attention. Stop rehearsing the old story. Stop zooming in on every detail of what went wrong and why it's always been this way. This isn't denial. This isn't pretending the problem doesn't exist. This is understanding that your attention is creative power, and wherever you direct it, consistently becomes your reality. The impact of this realization is profound, because most people have been taught that examining problems is how you solve them, that focusing on what's wrong is responsible and realistic. But there's a difference between acknowledging a problem and worshipping it with your attention. Behind the scenes of transformation, what's actually happening is a redirection of focus from the problem screen to the possibility screen. Drop in the comments, "I'm turning away from the old screen," because declaring this shift in attention is how you begin to break the hypnotic hold the problem has had on your consciousness. Turning away from the old screen is only half the equation. What matters just as much is what you turn toward. So walk to that blank screen, the one that's been waiting for your attention this entire time, and ask yourself a question that might feel strange at first. If I were the person for whom this is already resolved, how would I describe myself? Not how would I wish to be, not how I hope to become someday, but how would I describe the version of me for whom this outcome is already a completed internal fact? Replace "I never" with "I am someone for whom it is natural that." Replace "I can't" with "I easily." Replace "It's always been hard for me" with "I'm the kind of person who." This might feel like lying at first, especially if your current circumstances are screaming the opposite. But here's the hidden truth that most people miss entirely. You're not lying. You're choosing. And there's a massive difference between those two things. Lying is saying something you know to be false while hoping no one notices. Choosing is deciding which version of reality you're going to give your energy to, which identity you're going to occupy, which narrative you're going to make true through sustained attention and embodiment. The person you've been until now, that was also a choice, just one made unconsciously through repetition and acceptance of inherited beliefs. The journey of transformation begins the moment you understand that your identity isn't a fixed thing, handed to you at birth. It's a creative act happening continuously. Every time you describe yourself, you're not reporting facts. You're making decisions about who you're going to be in the next moment. Most people just keep making the same decision over and over without realizing they have options. They wake up and automatically slip back into the familiar identity like putting on old clothes, never questioning whether those clothes still fit or serve them. Begin to describe yourself as the person who already lives the result, even if nothing outside confirms it yet. Even if your bank account says something different. Even if your relationship status hasn't changed, even if your body looks the same. The external confirmation comes later. It has to, because external circumstances can only reflect sustained internal states, and it takes time for that reflection to catch up. But the choice to occupy a new state, that happens instantly. That's the decision you make right now in this control room of your consciousness. The impact of this choice ripples through everything. The decisions you make throughout your day begin to shift. The opportunities you notice change. The energy you bring into conversations transforms. The boundaries you set become clearer. The respect you command increases. Not because you're forcing anything or pretending to be something you're not, but because you've genuinely chosen to occupy a different state, and from that state, different actions feel natural, different possibilities feel accessible, different outcomes feel inevitable. Leave a comment saying, "I choose the new version now," because making that declaration publicly is how you begin to anchor this choice beyond just a fleeting thought into an actual commitment you're making to yourself. Once you choose the new version, you might feel a surge of clarity, maybe even excitement. This is the moment where most people make a critical mistake. They think understanding is the same as transformation. They get the insight, feel inspired, and then return to their regular programming within hours or days, wondering why nothing changed. Here's what they're missing. Understanding these ideas intellectually isn't enough. You need structured, disciplined daily practices to train your mind to remain in the state you choose, instead of automatically reverting to the old script the moment something challenging happens. Think of it like learning a new language. You can understand the grammar, memorize vocabulary, feel excited about the possibility of being fluent. But if you don't practice daily, if you don't immerse yourself in it consistently, you'll default back to your native tongue every time. Your mind works the same way with states. The old state is your native language. It's comfortable, familiar, automatic. The new state requires practice until it becomes just as automatic, just as natural, just as reflexive as the old one used to be. This is where the journey gets real, where you separate people who transform from people who just collect interesting concepts. The hidden truth that changes everything is this: it's not the intensity of your effort that defines the result. It's the constancy of the state you silently sustain. Most people approach transformation like it's a sprint. They believe that striving harder, working longer, forcing more will bring them closer to their desires. They exhaust themselves trying to make things happen, pushing and grinding and hustling, all while maintaining the same internal state of lack, fear, and desperation. But here's the revelation: effort from a place of scarcity only creates more scarcity. Action from a state of "I don't have it yet" only reinforces the experience of not having. The impact of understanding this shifts your entire approach. You stop measuring success by how busy you are or how exhausted you feel at the end of the day. You start measuring it by how consistently you're able to maintain the chosen state regardless of what's happening externally. Behind the scenes of every major transformation, there's not some heroic moment of massive effort. There's quiet consistency. There's the decision made every morning to occupy the new state before checking your phone. There's the redirection of attention every time the old narrative tries to take over. There's the conscious choice throughout the day to respond to situations from the identity you've claimed rather than the identity you're leaving behind. These micro-decisions accumulate into something that eventually looks like a sudden breakthrough to others, but you'll know it was actually the result of sustained state over time. Type in the comments, consistency over intensity, because naming this principle helps you remember it when the temptation arises to abandon the steady path for the illusion of dramatic action. Consistency over intensity matters because without it, you end up trapped in what I call the hamster wheel syndrome. Effort without state is exactly like that. Lots of frantic movement, visible activity, sweat and exhaustion, but zero real progress. You've probably experienced this yourself. Days where you rush from task to task, solve crisis after crisis, handle problem after problem, and at the end of it all you collapse into bed feeling like you've been through battle, yet somehow nothing meaningful has actually shifted. You're in the exact same position you were when you woke up, just more tired. This happens because your internal state remained unchanged throughout all that activity. You were operating from the same identity, the same assumptions, the same energetic frequency, just moving faster within it. It's like rearranging furniture in a house that's built on a cracked foundation. No matter how many times you redecorate, the fundamental structure remains flawed. The hidden truth is that transformation doesn't come from doing more. It comes from being different while you do whatever you do. There's a crucial distinction here that most people never grasp, and it explains why two people can take the same actions and get completely different results. There's doing from a place of lack, and there's doing from a place of completeness. When you act from lack, every movement you make carries a silent, underlying message. I still don't have. I still am not. I haven't achieved it yet. You're working to prove yourself, to escape your current situation, to finally arrive at some future point where you'll be worthy, successful, enough. The energy behind the action is desperate, grasping, fearful. Think about the decisions you make from this place. You take jobs you don't want because you're afraid of not having enough. You stay in relationships that drain you because being alone feels like failure. You say yes when you mean no because you're afraid of missing out or being rejected. You work yourself to exhaustion, trying to earn value. You believe you don't inherently possess Behind the scenes of all this activity is a state of insufficiency, and no amount of action from that state will ever make you feel complete, because the action itself is reinforcing the belief that you're incomplete. Now contrast that with doing from a place of completeness. This doesn't mean you have everything you want externally. It means your internal state is one of sufficiency, of already being the person who deserves and naturally attracts what you desire. From this state, you still take action, sometimes even more action than before. But the quality of that action is entirely different. You're not working to become worthy. You're expressing the worthiness you've already claimed. The impact of this shift is subtle at first, but compounds dramatically over time. Write in the comments, "I act from completeness now," because stating this helps you catch yourself the next time you're about to take action from a place of lack and consciously shift the state you're operating from. When you act from completeness, something fundamental shifts in the quality of everything you do. You're no longer performing to prove anything or convince the world of your worth. You don't need external validation, because internally you've already validated yourself. Instead, you do things because it's simply natural for the state you've assumed to produce certain behaviors, choices, and responses. It's like breathing. You don't breathe to prove you're alive. You breathe because you are alive, and breathing is the natural expression of that aliveness. This is where the transformation becomes visible to others, even though they won't understand what actually changed. They'll say, "You seem different, more confident, more centered." But they won't realize it's because you've stopped acting from desperation and started acting from sovereignty. The decisions you make from this place carry a different energy entirely. You negotiate differently because you're not afraid to walk away. You show up to opportunities differently because you know there will be others. You set boundaries differently because you're no longer willing to compromise your peace for approval. Now here's where it gets really interesting. And this is something that reveals the hidden truth about success and fulfillment. Two people can work the exact same job, earn the exact same salary, live in the same city, have similar responsibilities, but their internal experience will be completely different based on the state they're occupying. One person feels trapped, desperate, suffocated by their circumstances. They wake up every morning with this heavy dread, counting down the hours until they can escape back home, mentally rehearsing all the reasons why they're stuck and can't leave. Every day reinforces their identity as someone who's imprisoned by necessity, forced to endure what they hate. The other person in that identical external situation internally sees themselves at an entirely different level. They're using their current job as a bridge, not a cage. They show up with completely different energy because their internal narrative is different. They're not there because they have no other options. They're there because this particular chapter serves the larger story they're writing. They observe things the first person never notices, skills being developed, connections being made, opportunities emerging. Behind the scenes of their consciousness, they're already living from the next level, even though externally nothing has changed yet. The impact of this difference in awareness cannot be overstated. It's not about positive thinking or forcing yourself to be grateful for something that genuinely doesn't serve you. It's about understanding that your current circumstances don't define your trajectory, your state does. The journey you're on is determined by where you see yourself going, not where you currently stand. Drop a comment saying, "I'm the bridge person," because claiming this identity helps you shift from feeling trapped by circumstances to seeing them as temporary stations on a much larger journey. Being the bridge person means understanding there's an enormous difference between how you move through your days. Some people spend every moment putting out fires, crisis management from the second they open their eyes until they collapse at night. Others spend their days polishing a diamond. Same 24 hours, completely different experience. The first person is in constant reaction mode, lurching from one emergency to the next, always behind, always scrambling. The second person is creating from a chosen state, making decisions that compound towards something they're building with intention. This distinction reveals something crucial about how transformation actually works in practical, everyday terms. The firefighter lives at the mercy of whatever shows up. Their mood is determined by their notifications. Their energy is drained by every unexpected demand. Their sense of self-worth rises and falls with external validation. They're exhausted, not because they're doing more, but because they're operating without an internal anchor. Behind the scenes of their experience is chaos, masquerading as productivity. The diamond polisher, on the other hand, approaches each day with a completely different framework. They understand that before they can effectively engage with external demands, they need to align internally with the identity they've chosen. This is the hidden truth that separates people who transform from people who just survive. The reactive person wakes up already late, immediately grabs their phone before their eyes are fully open, fills their mind with messages, news, problems, other people's agendas, and from that moment forward they're simply reacting to whatever stimulus comes next. Their day owns them. The aligned person has a different morning ritual, even if it's just 5 minutes. They start by internally connecting with the state they've decided to occupy. This might look like sitting in silence, visualizing the version of themselves they're becoming, repeating phrases that reinforce their chosen identity, or simply taking a few conscious breaths while reminding themselves who they are beyond their circumstances. They're not trying to escape reality or pretend problems don't exist. They're establishing their internal state before external forces try to determine it for them. The impact of this small shift compounds dramatically. Throughout the day, when challenges arise, and they will, the aligned person doesn't collapse into reaction mode. They respond from the state they established that morning. A difficult email doesn't ruin their day because their state isn't dependent on emails. An unexpected bill doesn't create panic because their financial identity isn't determined by individual bills. A rejection doesn't devastate them because their worth isn't up for negotiation based on other people's decisions. The journey they're on is internally directed, not externally dictated. Leave a comment. I'm polishing my diamond, because declaring this helps you remember tomorrow morning when the temptation arises to grab your phone first instead of claiming your state first. Polishing your diamond isn't a one-time morning ritual that magically protects you for the rest of the day. It's something that happens through small, seemingly insignificant choices made throughout your entire day. Brief moments of silence when you could be scrolling. Clear visualization while you're waiting in line instead of mentally rehearsing problems. Repeated phrases whispered to yourself in the car, in the shower, before meetings. These micro practices are how you remind yourself of the state you've decided to maintain, especially when external circumstances are trying to pull you back into the old identity. This is where most people abandon the journey because they're expecting transformation to feel dramatic and obvious. They don't realize that the real work happens in these tiny decision points that seem too small to matter. Do you check your phone the moment you feel uncomfortable, or do you sit with the discomfort for 30 seconds and consciously choose your state? Do you immediately react to that irritating message, or do you pause and ask yourself how the version of you that you're becoming would respond? Do you let that setback define your entire day, or do you acknowledge it and then deliberately return to the identity you've claimed? These small choices are what separate people who actually transform from people who just keep going in circles, wondering why nothing ever changes despite all their effort. Behind the scenes of every major shift is this accumulation of micro decisions where you chose the new state over the familiar comfort of the old one. The impact isn't visible immediately, and that's exactly why most people give up too soon. They make the right choice a few times, don't see instant results, and conclude it's not working. But here's the hidden truth about how this actually operates in reality. External signs are not commands telling you what's true about you. They're merely delayed mirrors reflecting what you've already sustained internally. Think of it like an old radio. You turn the knob to change the station, but there's a moment, sometimes several moments, where you're still hearing the old station. There's static interference, a transition period before the new station comes through clearly. The fact that you're hearing remnants of the old station doesn't mean you didn't turn the knob. It just means the system is completing the adjustment. Your reality works exactly the same way. When you shift your internal state, when you claim a new identity, don't expect everything around you to instantly reorganize. There will be evidence of the old station still playing, old bills arriving, echoes of past patterns showing up, situations that were set in motion when you were operating from the previous state. If you interpret these as proof that nothing's changed, you'll turn the knob back to the old station and restart the entire cycle. Type in the comments, "I trust the transition," because learning to stay steady during this lag time between internal shift and external manifestation is where real power develops. Trusting the transition means understanding something that will save you from unnecessary doubt and frustration. When you assume a new state, when you genuinely shift your internal identity, don't expect immediate external changes that match the new you. In fact, expect the opposite initially. There will be noise from the old station continuing to play for a while. Old bills showing up in your mailbox, echoes from past relationships resurfacing, situations and circumstances that were created back when you were vibrating at a completely different level. The critical mistake most people make is interpreting these remnants as proof that nothing has changed, that the state shift didn't work, that they're still stuck in the same reality. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything when you really grasp it. These lingering problems aren't evidence of your current state. They're debris from your previous state, still clearing out of your experience. Think about it like this. If you've been living in a certain way for years, making decisions from a particular identity, those decisions created momentum that doesn't stop instantly just because you've internally shifted. The bills were already in motion. The relationship patterns were already established. The work situations were already unfolding based on who you were being last month, last year. The journey through this transition period requires something most people struggle with: the ability to look at these old problems as remnants rather than as current reality. You're essentially watching the final scenes of a movie that's already over while knowing a completely different film is about to begin. The impact of maintaining this perspective is enormous because it determines whether you stay the course or abandon ship right when you're closest to breakthrough. What helps is remembering that you're not trying to force external circumstances to change through willpower or manipulation. You're remaining firm in the new state you've chosen and allowing events to naturally reorganize themselves over time to match this new internal reality. Behind the scenes, there's a restructuring happening. Opportunities that align with your new state start appearing. People who match your new frequency begin entering your life. Situations that would have devastated the old, you barely register now because you're operating from a different foundation entirely. This is where patience becomes your greatest ally. Not the passive kind of patience that's just waiting and hoping, but active patience, continuing to make choices. From the new state, even while the external evidence still shows the old one, you honor your responsibilities, deal with what needs dealing with, but you don't let these things define you anymore. You're watching them resolve like someone observing the closing credits of a show they've already finished watching. Write in the comments, "Old station fading out," because acknowledging this process helps you stay grounded when remnants of the past try to convince you that nothing has changed. Internally, as the old station fades out, you might notice something that seems contradictory at first. Let's say you've genuinely shifted your internal state. You've started seeing yourself as prosperous, abundant, someone for whom money flows naturally. Yet in the following days or weeks, you might still be dealing with old debts, collection notices, financial obligations that feel heavy and burdensome. This is where most people panic and think, "See, this doesn't work. I changed my mindset, but I'm still broke." But that interpretation completely misses what's actually happening beneath the surface. This isn't proof that the method doesn't work. This is the stage where life is clearing the ground. Think of it like cleaning out a house you've lived in for years. When you finally commit to organizing everything, it often looks worse before it looks better. You pull things out of closets, uncover forgotten messes, confront accumulated clutter. The mess becoming visible isn't a sign you're failing at cleaning. It's evidence that the cleaning process has actually begun. Life is displaying what was planted in previous states, bringing forward the consequences of old decisions so they can be resolved and completed. The hidden truth here is that transformation doesn't erase the past. It changes how you relate to the past. You still honor your responsibilities. You still do what needs to be done. You pay the bills. You handle the obligations. You show up for the commitments you made. But here's the crucial shift. You don't define yourself by these transitional circumstances anymore. You watch old problems like you're sitting in a theater watching the final minutes of a film, already knowing that another completely different movie is about to begin. You're present for the ending, but you're not emotionally invested in it as if it determines your future. Behind the scenes of this process, something profound is happening. You're learning to separate your identity from your circumstances. Most people are so deeply fused with their current situation that they can't imagine themselves as anything other than what their bank account, relationship status, or job title says they are. But when you can look at debt and simultaneously hold the internal knowing that you are prosperous, when you can face a problem without letting it shake your sense of self, you've developed a level of consciousness that most people never access. The impact of this shift is that you handle challenges differently. The old you would have spiraled into panic, spent sleepless nights worrying, maybe made desperate decisions from fear. The new you acknowledges the situation, takes appropriate action, and remains internally unmoved because you know this is just the completion of an old cycle, not the beginning of a new pattern. The journey you're on is teaching you that who you are is not determined by what's happening to you. Drop in the comments, "I honor but don't identify," because this phrase captures the balance between being responsible for your obligations while refusing to let them define your identity or limit your future. Honoring without identifying is powerful, but there's something even deeper that needs to be addressed if you truly want transformation. This might be uncomfortable to hear, but it's necessary. You need to abandon the emotional addiction of being the preferred victim of your own stories. I know that sounds harsh, maybe even offensive, but stay with me because this is where most people get stuck without realizing it. You've grown accustomed over the years to collecting evidence that you're forgotten, wronged, rejected, sabotaged by life, by people, by circumstances beyond your control. There's a strange comfort in this role, isn't there? A familiarity that feels almost safe because at least you know what to expect. You've built an entire identity around being the person things don't work out for, the one who always gets the short end of the stick, who tries so hard but never quite gets the breakthrough everyone else seems to stumble into effortlessly. And here's the hidden truth that most people will deny even as they're living it. There's a part of you that actually likes being right about your own pain. This isn't about blaming yourself or adding guilt to suffering. It's about recognizing a pattern that operates beneath conscious awareness. That part of you would rather continue suffering, would rather keep the same problems recurring as long as it gets to say, "See, I knew it, I told you, it's always like this with me." There's a perverse satisfaction in being proven right about your limitations, because at least then you're right about something, even if what you're right about is your own misery. Behind the scenes of your consciousness, you've been protecting this suffering identity as if it were a treasure, as if letting it go would mean losing something essential about who you are. Maybe you've built relationships around shared complaints. Maybe you get attention through your struggles. Maybe suffering has become the only language you know how to speak when connecting with others. The impact of releasing this identity can feel terrifying, because it means stepping into unknown territory where you can no longer predict outcomes based on past patterns. But transformation demands that you stop treating your pain like a pet you've grown attached to, feeding it daily with evidence and attention, keeping it alive through repeated storytelling. This doesn't mean pretending you haven't been hurt or that difficult things haven't happened. It means refusing to let those experiences become the central organizing principle of your identity. The journey forward requires you to look at everything you've been through and make a conscious decision. This was experience. This was raw material. This taught me things, but this is not who I am, and this is not what determines what's possible for me now. Leave a comment. I release the victim story, because speaking this declaration begins the process of unhooking your identity from the narrative of suffering you've been unconsciously protecting. Releasing the victim story doesn't mean you're erasing what happened to you or pretending the pain wasn't real. That would be spiritual bypassing, and it doesn't work. What abandoning this addiction actually means is looking at everything that happened, every betrayal, every loss, every disappointment, every moment you felt crushed, and making a conscious decree. This was raw material. This shaped me, taught me, revealed things about myself and the world, but this is not my final definition. This is not the ceiling of what's possible for me. There's a massive difference between acknowledging your history and being imprisoned by it. Your past can inform you without defining you. The hidden truth is that some of the strongest, most magnetic people you'll ever meet have been through absolute hell, but somewhere along their journey, they made a decision. They looked at their pain and said, "You don't get to write the rest of my story." That decision, that moment of reclaiming authorship, is what separates people who transform from people who remain stuck in loops of resentment and victimhood. Think of it like an actor who's played the same role for years. Everyone knows them as that character. The public expects it. Casting directors see them that way. Even the actor themselves starts to blur the line between who they are and who they've been portraying. Then one day they're offered a completely different role, something powerful, respected, influential. If they accept it, they'll have to abandon the comfort of being recognized as that familiar character. They'll face criticism from people saying they don't fit the new role, that they should stick to what they're known for. This is exactly what happens when you assume a new state of power, worthiness, prosperity. There will be people who only knew how to relate to your struggling version, your wounded version, your limited version. They'll feel uncomfortable with your transformation, not because they're malicious, but because your change disrupts the dynamic they were comfortable with. Behind the scenes, they might even try to pull you back, reminding you of old failures, questioning your new confidence, subtly undermining your growth. The journey forward requires you to be faithful to your new role anyway, not in an arrogant or dismissive way, but with quiet certainty. You're not trying to prove anything to them. You're simply refusing to shrink back into the smaller version of yourself just to make others comfortable. The impact of this choice ripples through everything. The opportunities you pursue, the boundaries you set, the energy you bring into every space you occupy. Type in the comments, "Faithful to the new me," because stating this publicly creates accountability and reminds you who you've chosen to be when pressure comes to revert to old patterns. Being faithful to the new you brings us to what I consider the synthesis of everything we've discussed, the principle that ties all of this together into something you can actually live. You need to start living as if you have already received what you desire, not as a performance for others, not as something you do when people are watching to impress them or convince them of your success. This is an intimate, silent, unshakable decision about who you are right now, in this moment. Regardless of what your bank account says, what your relationship status shows, what your current circumstances look like. This is where most people completely misunderstand what manifestation actually means. They think it's about pretending, about putting on a show, about forcing themselves to feel positive when they don't. But that's not what this is at all. Living as if you've already received it means adjusting your internal posture. The way you hold yourself in consciousness, the tone of your self-talk, where you direct your focus, the quality of energy you bring into each moment. It's moving through life, like someone who already knows where they're going and no longer needs to ask reality for permission to want what they want. The hidden truth is in the questions you ask yourself throughout the day. Most people are constantly asking, will this work out? Can I really have this? What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? These questions are broadcasts of uncertainty, of someone who hasn't yet claimed their desire as an internal fact. But when you shift to living as if, the questions change entirely. You stop asking, will it work out? And start asking, how does someone for whom this has already worked out respond to this moment? How would the version of me who's already living this handle this challenge? What decision would they make right now? This subtle shift in questioning changes everything because it moves you from hoping and wishing into embodiment and expression. Behind the scenes, your nervous system can't tell the difference between something that happened externally and something you've fully embodied internally. When you consistently ask yourself how the successful version of you would respond, you start naturally making the choices that person would make, carrying the energy they would carry, setting the boundaries they would set, pursuing the opportunities they would pursue. The impact of this isn't just psychological, it's practical. The decisions you make from this place are fundamentally different. You negotiate from power instead of desperation. You walk away from what doesn't serve you instead of clinging to it out of fear. You invest in yourself because that's what someone who's already successful does. The journey becomes about expression rather than acquisition, about revealing what's already true internally rather than chasing something external you hope will complete you. Write in the comments, I'm living from the end, because this phrase captures the essence of operating from the assumption that what you desire is already done, and you're simply allowing reality to catch up to that internal certainty. Living from the end is where the real transformation happens. And if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, if you're still here reading these words right now, that tells me something important about you. You're not someone who just collects information and moves on. You're someone who's genuinely ready to apply this, to live it, to become it. If this message resonated with you, if something shifted while you were watching, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. Not because I'm trying to hit some arbitrary number, but because there's so much more we're going to explore together. Deeper principles, practical applications, the kind of revelations that don't just inspire you for a moment, but actually change how you move through the world. This is just the beginning of what we're building here, and leave me a comment saying, this message was meant for me, because when you write that, you're not just leaving a comment, you're making a declaration. You're telling yourself and the universe that you recognize this wasn't random, that you're claiming this information as yours, that you're ready to step into what comes next. If you found value in this, hit that like button. It helps this reach other people who need to hear it, people who are searching for exactly this message right now, just like it found you. Before you go, there's another video right here that goes even deeper into how to maintain this state. when life tests you, when old patterns try to pull you back. Click on it and continue with me over there. Let's keep this momentum going. I'll see you in the next one.